Have you found that after things got easier for you, you started sleeping easier, your days were lighter, you're not as anxious, thanks to starting this journey of learning about yourself, learning about sleep and self-exploration? You're finding yourself in a place that look exactly like where you began. You have choppy nights, or even stretches of them. You're thinking a lot about sleep again. You're very worried. You're behaving exactly as you were when you began this path. And you wonder, am I back to square one? Have I gone backwards all the way to where I began? Do I have to start all over again? If any of this sounds like you recognize yourself, then this class is for you. We're going to see that there is no square one in the sense that we've described. Rather, you're at a place where you have the perfect setup for continuing the journey of leaving insomnia and finding peaceful sleep and peace of mind. Let's have a look. Hi there, and welcome to this episode of Insomnia Insight, in which I hope you'll find a ton of value. Again, we're going to talk about a situation that is described very often to me and all of our coaches. And it's often worded like this. Someone will say, hey, Daniel, am I back to square one? Or, Daniel, have I undone all my progress? Do I have to start all over again? Sometimes it's very specific. Sometimes people ask me, hey, Daniel, like, do I have to go back? Do I have to be set back to day one of bedtime and start all over again? Do I have to go back and read all your books again? Like things of that nature. Again, we often have the sense that we are back to where we started. Like everything has been undone for us. We have gone backwards, rewind, and we're afraid that we now have to start over again. And then of course, if that happens once, then we can think, well, how many times can I be back to square one? Like, can I ever leave the struggle? This is why I really want to talk about the topic of square one, which is really square none. We'll see that this is really an illusion. This square one, as in a place that we can go back to, is square none. It is an illusion. We'll see why that is, and how we really are at a place of a setup for leaving the struggle. But yes, so to organize this a bit more, we're going to divide this class into 3 sections. We're going to learn about why we think we're at square one. Then we're going to see irrefutable evidence that it doesn't exist. We're going to see that it actually doesn't exist and why. And then we're going to see where we truly are and how to move forward. And by the way, there is a plot twist right there in section 3, a little bit of a plot twist there. But anyway, let's start with number 1 here. Why we think we are at square one. Really, why we come to think that we're at square one is I divided it into 1 or 2 reasons, A and B here. A, things are happening that happened when we began this journey. And so when I say began this journey, what do I mean with that? I mean that we have had this struggle with sleep. We've had insomnia for X amount of time. Now, that may be weeks, months, year, decades, doesn't really matter. But the journey begins when we find helpful education like we have here. We stumble across this channel, for example, and you start learning about sleep, about yourself, about emotions, about the inner struggle, right? That is where the journey begins, right? But like at that point where we begin the journey, that's still a place where we're struggling a lot, right? We're having nights of little sleep. We're worried. We don't feel like ourselves. We feel isolated. We don't connect to anyone. We think we're the only ones, right? We're just grasping at straws. That's where the journey begins. It begins at a very difficult place. And after the journey has begun, we've started learning. We're seeing we're not the only one. We've found community. Things have gotten easier for us. Then, if we again find ourselves in a place that reminds us of where the journey began, we're again having choppy nights, and we're experiencing things that we experienced then. Things are happening that happened then. We can think we're back because things are happening that happened when the journey began. Like from the kind of the observer standpoint, things are happening the way they happened then, or we are thinking, feeling, behaving like when the journey began. We may have, when the journey began, we may have been like thinking nonstop about sleep. We were anxious all the time. We were taking supplements and pills and like setting up blackout curtains and, doing breathing exercises, pacing around the room, all night long. And we can find ourselves, after things have gotten easier for a stretch, we can find ourselves again thinking nonstop about sleep, again being really worried, again, doing these things, like engaging in all these sleep efforts, all these things that are an attempt to control sleep again. And so this, even things are happening that happened in the beginning, or we are thinking, feeling, behaving like we were when the journey began, that can make us think, oh my gosh, I'm back to square one. This is exactly where I began, right? So to just go over like, I think I already kind of covered it, but I wrote down some more specific examples. So we haven't had a really choppy night for months, then we do. That can make us think we're back to square one. Or we haven't had a stretch of choppy nights in weeks, then we do. That can make us think we've gone backwards. We haven't been like really worried, really frazzled with the palpitations, feeling nauseous, like vomiting, all this stuff for a long while, then we do. Then we can think we're back to square one. Or we haven't acted like sleep or our feelings are things we can control for a chunk of time, but now we are. And in fact, it was very recently somebody told me that they were sort of observing themselves, acting like they were when the journey began. They said, I haven't tried to take like a sleeping pill for a long time, but I found myself trying again. I found myself pacing around the room again. I found myself doing all the things I used to do when the journey began, right? And that can make us think again, like the way we behave can make us think, I'm back to square one. But in reality, that is not the case. And we are going to see why in a second. I think I covered everything. We acted. Yeah, so basically conclude this section. Things look like they did when we started recovery pack, hence we wonder if we have gone backwards exactly. So now we have covered the first section of this talk, why we think we're at square one. And now we're going to look at that irrefutable evidence that it doesn't actually exist, like that square one as a place where we have gone back to, where we're starting over from. It does not actually exist. Square one in that sense is square none. And here's the evidence. When we started the journey, we actually did not compare it. We don't compare where we were to a previous starting point. At the true square one is that place where we start learning, start the journey. At that true square one, we don't wonder if we have gone back to another place. We don't wonder if we're back to where we started when we are actually at the place where we start. In other words, at the true square one, we don't have education, we don't have insight, we're just desperately trying to do anything to sleep, and we're not wondering if we have gone backwards because there's no place behind us, there's no place we have left behind. In other words, if we are thinking, have I gone back to square one, we are not thinking the way we are thinking when we are at the true square one, because at that place we're completely naive. We have no clue what's going on, right? So if we have the wherewithal, the insight, the experiences that can make us go, I think I have gone backwards, I think I have gone back to square one, that is impossible, because at square one, right, we were not thinking, I have gone backwards, I'm afraid I have gone backwards. So we can see it's like this square one as in a place that we can go back to. It's impossible. It can never happen. It doesn't exist. It's just an illusion. And next up, part 3 here, we're gonna talk about where we actually are and how we move from there, of course. But before that, there's one kind of logical piece of the puzzle that we have to cover before we go to section 3, and it's like, when you hear this, when you're at this part of this class, you might be thinking, okay, so if you're making the case that square one doesn't exist as a place we can go back to, then why is it that we can find ourselves in a place that looks and feels like square one, right? So if it doesn't exist again, why do we again find ourselves in a struggle that very much resembles what we went through as the journey began? The thing is that the human brain is a survival machine. The one thing that it wants to do, its one mission, is to keep us safe, keep us alive, keep us breathing, keep us, safe, keep us okay. And for this reason, it can, of course, identify things as threats. Like, if we're crossing the street and a bus is coming towards us, the brain is supposed to identify this as a potential threat, right? And we can go from being completely at peace, just like walking over the street and a beautiful day, thinking about something nice. And then there's a bus is coming towards us really quick. And we go from that peaceful mode to like threat mode in milliseconds. Like in milliseconds, we are like panicky. We're like, eyes are, pupils are dilated, heart is beating fast, like we're breathing fast, like we jump out of the way of the bus, right? That can happen in milliseconds. But if the bus passes us and we're on the, we're now completely safe, we're on the other end of the side, we're on the other sidewalk now, we've crossed the street, we don't go like, okay, good, now just go out of resistance. We don't go back from like threat mode to like peaceful mode in milliseconds. No, it can take quite a long time. Like for the rest of that day, we may be just thinking about like, oh my gosh, I almost got hit by a bus. I could have been killed. Like, how did I do that? How can I prevent that from happening again? Why, it can take a long while before we can just, peacefully cross the street again, right? And why does this happen? Well, it's because it's for safety reasons. Like if our brain identifies what it thinks is a threat, and let's say we think we barely escaped that threat, it's going to keep looking out for it. It's going to keep questioning if the threat is here again, if it's back, if we should like do some preemptive thing, if it just wants us to be prepared, whether it's a tangible, actual threat to us, like a bus, or a perceived threat, like not sleeping. It doesn't matter. The brain like acts the same way. And this is why the path of leaving the struggle, it is bumpy and it's longer than we expect. I've never heard anyone say like this was easier and faster than I expected. It's always like it's longer and it's bumpier than we expect. But it's of course it's a path of a lot of growth, like spiritual growth, like learning about ourselves. It's a really valuable journey, but it's typically longer and bumpier than we expect. But again, before we go to the next section, my point here is that if our brain has once perceived not sleeping as a threat, then even if we have been sleeping fine for a long stretch, like it takes a while before that idea of not sleeping being a threat has finally kind of like just faded away, right? So something can happen. It can be like, oh no, maybe this is threat. Maybe we missed something. Maybe this is happening. Like, and the brain can go back to like threat mode again, and that's why it's so normal, so typical to have these bumps, that can sometimes make us question if we are back to square one. So now over to section 3 here. Where are we truly? Okay. So when we are asking ourselves this question of whether or not we are back to square one, we are at a square that is very different from the true square one, right? And you see how we're using this analogy of squares here, like almost like a board game, right? You go from this square to this square to this square to this square, right? And so if we keep going with that analogy, when we are asking ourselves if we're back to square one, well, guess what? Then we are at that square. We are at the square where we wonder if we're back to square one, and that is a very, very common square, right? But that square, the square where we wonder if we're back to square one, it's not only a common and normal square on the journey, but that square is way removed from the true square one, right? The square where we wonder if we are back to square one is way, way ahead. Like it's way forward from the true square one. But that's the square we are at when we wonder if we are at square one. And so we're at the square where we wonder if we have gone back to square one, right? Now at the square, right? At this square, and again, there's some really helpful points to make here to see why it is not a setback, but this is a place where we are there's a setup for us here. So at the square where we wonder if we have gone back to square one, we have become educated on a theoretical level. We have understood on a theoretical level that there is no real danger. We have understood why insomnia happened. We have all this intellectual theoretical knowledge, but not only that, because if we're asking if we're back to square one, we have also seen a shift. We're seeing things change for us. So we not only have like the theoretical, intellectual, logical understanding, we have experiential learning. Like we have seen where things go when we are no longer in threat mode, when education has led us to not have the sense that we're threatened, right? So we cannot really go back to true square one, because these things that we learn, whether it is intellectually, logically, or experiential learning, we have that for life. That can never be taken away from us, right? So we cannot go back. There's no setback, but there is a setup here for leaving the struggle. We have all this knowledge and all this learning, and all we're facing is really, that's what we call a speed bump, like a bump on the journey, right? And this is a setup for learning. But here comes the plot twist, right? We have gone to great lengths here to talk about how we cannot go back to that true square one, but in a kind of like in a twist here, it is actually the exact same things, let's call them the exact same things, that led you from the true square one to the square where you wonder if you're back to square one. Those exact things will take you from the square where you wonder if you're back to square one to the square where you don't even look at the squares, where this whole thing is irrelevant for you. The struggle has faded in the background, and you're and you're immune. You're immune to insomnia, right? And so what was it that led you from the true square one here? Well, it was just seeing that there's no threat, understanding why, how the brain works, understanding how our brain can tokenize. It can misunderstand things that are completely harmless as threats, right? Understanding that on a theoretical level, and also seeing that us thinking that we're gone backwards, or feeling that way, or acting that way, that's also not a threat. That's another thing that we can think is a threat or a problem or something that shouldn't be happening, but that isn't, right? So that, like, understanding on the cognitive level, or finding a readiness to experience what we have tried to avoid, that led you from the true square one to things getting easier for you when you no longer avoiding emotions, where you no longer try to control thoughts. That led you to where things were easier, and that's going to help just as much now. It's the same thing again, including having a readiness to experience this kind of like resurgence of struggle, right? Having a readiness to experience the struggle in the first place, or now that it kind of resurfaces again, same thing. And of course, always being kind and gentle with ourselves, leaving self-judgment and harshness and criticism behind. That helped you when you started the journey, and that helps again. So in the plot twist here, although we've gone to great lengths to seeing that you cannot go back to the true square one, it is always the same teaching, same insights, same wisdom that led you like from the true square one to the square where you wonder if you are back to square one. Well, it's the same things that will lead you all the way to where you want to be, a place of peaceful sleep and peace of mind. Hope this brought a lot of value your way. As always, any comments, questions, post them in the comment section. And I look forward to having you back here real soon. Bye for now. Hi, it's me, Coach Daniel. And I hope that you found a ton of value in the video that you just saw. Now, if somebody would ask me, hey, Daniel, what do you think would really help somebody who has tuned in to a lot of the videos, who understands a lot, but who's just not seeing things change for them? I would say contextualization, discourse, to talk to somebody who understands what you've been going through, that you can ask questions to, get a reply, ask a follow-up question, get another reply, etc. That conversation so often starts to clarify things and really kickstarts your journey towards peaceful sleep. And one way you can have such a conversation is by booking a call with one of our coaches. In fact, you can head over to our website, thesleepcourseschool.com, and you can see which coaches offer calls and check out their individual success story to see if their story relates with you, and you find that connection that leads you to see that this is a person that I could work with. This is a person I would talk to. Then you can book a call, and that could be what really kickstarts your journey to where you want to be.